Tangara alumni are also disturbed at being taught false information. One of the things that most concerns them is negative messaging about the HPV cervical cancer vaccine that is given to Year 7 and 8 students in schools across Australia.
The school sent home a letter to the parents saying that we have to offer this to the girls. We recommend that they don't get it because it promotes promiscuity. It encourages them to sleep around and be unvirtuous to their future husbands. From what I can tell, 3 or 4 people out of a class of 35, it worked. The letter worked. There were only a few of us that went and got the vaccine.
Vaccinated young women describe a so-called walk of shame. Sam Green recalls a teacher's reaction when she raised her hand in class to say that she and another student had to go for their injection.
She launched into us and, was telling us it was a terrible idea for us to go and get this vaccine. It's encouraging us to sleep around. We are going to be sluts when we're older, all these sorts of things. I raised the very valid point with her that I could get this virus from my husband. And she basically told us to not come back after we'd had the vaccine back to that class.
A parent of a graduate of the class of 2020 told Four Corners she was called to a school meeting where the vaccine was discussed. She was horrified to hear it being discouraged on the grounds that the girls wouldn't need it because they would only have one sexual partner. When another mother challenged this, there was a noticeable cooling in the room and she was stared down by other parents in attendance, and her comment was not responded to by the presenters. Tangara admits it wrote to parents about the vaccine prior to 2020, when it claims it was relatively new. By 2020, the vaccine had been given in schools for 13 years. The school's statement says they now provide information to students that's in line with accepted medical advice.
So we were given a worksheet in class with this image.
So they're going to get into some really ridiculous stuff about pornography here, but I want to circle back to the HPV vaccine thing because this is a pretty big deal and it's pretty common. I remember when the HPV vaccine first came out and became widely available here in the United States. It was back around 2009 or 2010, maybe even a little bit earlier than that. I can't quite remember. But I do remember the moral outrage from everybody in the Catholic sphere about this thing. I grew up listening to a lot of EWTN. I actually have met some of the people that have had shows on EWTN back in my youth, and it was a big part of my growing up. And even when I was younger, I enjoyed listening to it too. But anyway, I digress. I remember so many of the talk shows talking about this HPV vaccine. And I remember one show in particular, this woman called in. It was like a call-in type thing where you ask questions. And this woman called in and said that they'd gone to their annual checkup with their children, and her daughter was 13 years old, and their pediatrician offered their daughter the HPV vaccine because it was available now. And her response was, "Oh, I'm not going to need that. I know what kind of girls that's for." Very subtle slut shaming, right? Very subtle. And this mother and daughter were lauded for being so virtuous and so in touch with reality, and good for you, Mom, you're doing the right thing. That's exactly the kind of attitude we want our daughters to be raised with. There is certainly a conversation to be had about vaccines and vaccine safety. That should be a part of every conversation you have with your doctor anytime you are considering getting a type of vaccine. They include that insert with the vaccine for a reason, so that the consumer or the patient can practice informed consent. But That is not what this is. This has no basis in reality. It has no basis in science. It has no grounding in anything other than, from what I can see, some very antiquated Victorian idea of female purity. But you would be shocked by how incredibly common it is. And I am not at all surprised to see it represented here as well. I mean, why not? We know Opus Dei is a very conservative Catholic organization. I mean, that's one of the things that they platform themselves on, practically. Again, this goes back to the conditioning and everything, but I remember that in a year after hearing that radio program, going to the doctor and our pediatrician asking me if I wanted the vaccine and me making a very similar comment. And this doctor kind of looked at me and kind of looked at my mom, and I think she knew. I think she could put two and two together, and she knew to leave well enough alone. I am sure she had some thoughts. And God bless her for not saying anything. I would have had a hard time biting my tongue, because there's just so much wrong with that idea. There's so much wrong with the idea that the only safe sex is with your husband, and that the only sex worth having is with your husband, or that if you only have sex with your husband, then everything will be okay and you will lead a charmed, perfect life full of sexual fulfillment. We all know that that is not the case. A real quick scroll through Reddit will show you that there are so many people on there talking about sexual dysfunction and the role that religion played in creating that. And then also to say nothing of people who've been sexually assaulted. Imagine what it's like for a child who's been sexually assaulted or molested to hear that they don't have any worth if they have already been with someone sexually before marriage, or hearing that they're not going to need this because the only person they're ever going to have sex with is their future hypothetical spouse. It makes me really, 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 really angry. And again, I think it's just sloppy. If you want to have a nuanced conversation about vaccines through the lens of religion, you can do that. But maybe an independent school that isn't even a religious school to begin with isn't the place to do that. I don't know. It's just a thought. I'm not advocating for those kinds of conversations, by the way. I'm not saying that I think that that's good or right or anything like that. I'm just saying that if you want to do that, if that's something that's important to you, there's a way in which you can go about doing it, and this ain't it. That's all I'm saying.